Excuse me, Jack? Paul Bowden here. There's no voice coming over on the Zoom.
There you go. You good, Paul?
I'm good now, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me start over again. So the reason for the variance is due to the extra costs that we've had to incur because the previous owner had buried so much unsuitable soil on site that we've had to go and excavate a 120 by 40 foundation, 9 feet down to find suitable soils to put this foundation on. That's about 1,600 cubic yards of material that had to be excavated, trucked off site, new material to be able to get 100% compaction has to be trucked in and put on site in order to fill the foundation. That's roughly, it's not done yet, but it's an additional about $300,000 just for that foundation in the removal and replacement of soils and compaction testing and so on. So the next two buildings have essentially the same situation. In fact, we understand from some people that have been around in Forest Ridge for a long time that even more unsuitable materials have been buried on the other sites, like old foundations. And how they were able to do that, I can't tell you because I just bought this at foreclosure, but we're expecting that we have to do the same thing. So the bylaws allow us to put a foundation in. So the plan is to put a foundation in that is a walkout, even though there's not much of a place to walk out to, but there'll be an extra living area for a basement space. Keeping the frame of the building and the look of the building from the front of the street exactly the same height from the road to the eaves and exactly the same roof line. Even though this is a 20-plus-year-old design, which I would love to replace with a more modern design, but keeping with the same look and feel of that building, we'd also like to be able to recoup some of our costs by adding a loft area on the front half of the roof structure, since that's unusable space anyhow. So that would allow us to have 5 living levels, 4 above ground, 1 below ground. And the town RSA states that I can only do 3, hence the reason for the variance request. So 4, right? So I just have 1 additional living space on the upper eaves, and all it is a bathroom, a bedroom, and a loft office space, just an open space, allowing you to have a little bit better views, more light, but still maintaining the same look architecturally from the front of the building. And that would also provide for some larger units within the development, which is a demand that I'm getting from people that are looking to buy units within the Forest Gardens area. Everyone that comes in that's bought, and we've sold out the existing building. We'll start closing those in the next couple of weeks. And the next building should be done sometime in December, January. And we have a list of 12 people already looking to buy those units. And we're starting a list for the last 2 buildings. So I'm trying to get this development done, buttoned up, paved, and completed in the next 2 or 3 years, depending upon the economy, which I think is a benefit for Forest Gardens and also the 2 units I'm trying to finish over at Forest Woods, which is separate from this. So that's what I'm asking for, is the ability to just add a living space in the unused attic area. Now, doing that would then require me to sprinkle the entire building with a sprinkler system, including the stair towers. And so the stair towers could have a slightly different design because today they're unsprinkled, but they have to be open. And that open space in those stair towers has caused a tremendous amount of rot in the other 2 buildings. So at my expense, I'm trying to find a way to figure out how to build a better stairway that doesn't inherently cause water, snow, and debris to come into those stair towers, could cause 1, a sort of a slippery nuisance in the wintertime, and 2, in the heavy rains, to just cause some of that, if you've seen in the other 2 buildings that have had the stair towers rebuilt, just to have those rot away because of all the water that floods into the building. So that's what I'm asking for.
Just to elaborate on what you're talking about. Okay, so you're talking about the 4 units on the top. So we wouldn't be adding additional units, we would just be increasing the amount of space available to each of those top units.
Jack, we can't hear Carol's comments. Thank you.
These are going to take some getting used to. Attic space really going to enhance level by adding another bedroom, bathroom, and so there would be a 4-bedroom unit instead of a 3-bedroom unit. Because it looked to me like from the plans, unit was additionally 3 bedrooms.
Right, so
But
the
it
units
would
would
not-
become 4-bedroom, 3-bath units.
Okay, so
The 3-bedroom. I'm sorry, there'll be 4-bedroom, 3-bath units instead of 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
okay, so that's important only because there, even if he adds another bedroom for adding 5 or more bedrooms.
Right. And we've added additional parking by taking out, if you notice, the first 2 buildings had a little bump out in the front of the building. And we've taken that out in the current building because it served no purpose. So it's an easier way to landscape it. It has a nicer walkway, easier access from your car to the building, to the stairways or the ramp. So we could add about a half a dozen additional spaces in front of the building if required.
Base of the basement. Bottom, is that, am I getting that right, or is? Those
1 bedroom, 1
spaces,
bathroom, and a living space.
yeah, as the top,
And
only
that
this would
doesn't
be the
require,
bottom.
if I just did that,
Yep,
that according to town ordinance doesn't require a variance. That's acceptable because it's below grade.
okay, so I
Doesn't
just,
change the road to E
Right.
height, and it doesn't change the living.
wanted to point out that it's not going to,
No separate entrance, not a separate unit. There's still 12-unit buildings.
the main unit, which is on the first floor, you know,
And there'll be a stairway to the 2nd floor. And from the first unit, there'll be a stairway to the basement.
okay,
It also allows us to put the mechanical rooms on the first 4 units in the basement, as opposed to outside, which there are done now to save space on the inside, because the units are a little cramped for space, even though they're about 2,200 square feet.
that's that.
Thank you.
So
Correct.
I just wanted to point that.
Yeah, thank you.
David, will these buildings have an elevator
No.
and they're 4 stories going up?
Well, they're 3 stories from the outside. So the only 4th story is only accessible, I'm sorry, the uppermost story is only accessible from the inside of the uppermost unit. So you can't get to the next living level from the stair tower.
Okay, so you go.
So you go into the 3rd floor,
Unit.
come in the unit, and then you'd have a staircase, you know, somewhat to be defined by the owner. We think it's a relatively modest staircase. It could be a circular staircase if you wanted it for aesthetic reasons or something, but we just show a regular hidden staircase there.
One of the concerns that I saw raised was the height, the total height of the building in comparison to the existing buildings. Are these buildings, these 2, 5, and 6, going to be higher in height than the existing building?
They are not. The plans you have in front of you show the ground to the E, which is the RSA requirement, exactly the same height as the current buildings. All we're doing is encapsulating the roof line as living spaces if you would do, you know, building a loft in your house. Right? There's no additional height from the floor to the top of the ridge or from the floor to the roof line compared to the other 4 buildings.
A couple of questions. Some have been answered already, and I was assured, and I thought so, that the basement part of the building wouldn't require any permitting. It's just the actual living space in what I'll call the roof area, the upper level.
Yeah, according to the RSA.
Yeah, the RSA. Now-
If I didn't do the basement,
Yeah.
then the upper floor wouldn't require a variance either. So it's just when you get over that 4 levels of living space.
Because the eve would still be 35 feet to the primary eve. Okay. So what I don't see now are the bedrooms for the upstairs units on the 4th floor. Are the bedrooms in the back of the building or the front of the building?
Front of the building.
Because see, I think I'm looking at the front of the building here and I don't see any windows up there.
There's an egress window on well, maybe they're on the back side. Just look at
If
it.
I'm looking on the backside, saying those look like the bedrooms to me on the backside.
Yeah, I think you're right. Stuart was supposed to be here, but he's still
Okay.
coaching his
No, no,
sons.
He's over there.
Oh, hey, he magically appeared. Perfect on time. So let Stuart answer that.
Beautiful.
He, in the back
They're
side.
on the back. Okay.
And there is a window on the back wall
I can see
for
that.
egress. Yeah.
Yeah, the towers on the back of the building go up and those are all windowed. The decks are in between. I went up and I looked at the site this week and I did see the extensive foundation work you're doing on the existing building right now. And I actually got out and I walked out and the building foundations are staked and the big vault is in the middle for the electric. I went to the very back of the wall, you know, there's the rock wall at the back.
Of the building we're putting in now.
No, not the one you're in now, the
Oh, the
one
last two.
sites we're going to.
Yeah.
There's, and you'll be dealing with this, if you're gonna have to excavate all that material, in other words, you've got material stored on the ground.
Yes,
That has to come off, and then you have to dig down and remove all the contaminated soil below.
correct.
There's one of those original developer rock walls there at the back of the property that probably drops 20 feet straight down.
Yeah, it's not quite that, but yeah,
Somewhere
it's
out there.
it's a big wall.
And I think that's gonna, boy, when you get into digging there.
Well, we dig from the front, so just like, I mean, the current foundation we just put in has a 9-foot wall on one side. And we dug that without any issues, and that building was pulled a foot or two towards the front of the street, you know, to make sure that that rock wall was protected. Right, so we understand the height of those walls behind that and the land that sits behind it, so. We were able to do it on this building. I don't have any question that we could do it
Yeah,
safely on the next 2 buildings.
that's good, because that,
And in fact, easier because I don't have to build a full wall across the back because the bottom of that will be
Walk up.
open.
Yeah.
So call it a walkout without having a place to walk out to.
that's the thing, is there's not much to go there. And
You gotta
it's a
walk
long
out
way
and-
down,
and then-
that's,
Hit a slope that goes down at about 10 degrees, yeah.
I think that's all I had for question.
Okay.
We want to open the meeting for public comment at this point?
Second.
Yes, Jack seconded it.
Very good.
All those in favor?
Aye. Okay, the meeting's open for public comment.
Want to use the mic? Identify yourself, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on. You guys can hear me? Hi, everybody on the phone can hear as well? Good. Hi, I'm Greg Casado. I'm one of the owners at Forest Gardens. I'm also the HOA president for Forest Gardens itself. I sent a letter in with some concerns and I heard you address the parking concerns. So I do thank you on that one. That is good to hear. When you say the height of the building is 35 feet, where are you specifically measuring from? From the road?
Building below the height ordinance, the ordinance is written as the maximum height of 35 feet to the primary deep on the upper side of the structure. So the building is well within the permissible ordinances of the town.
Okay, so it's from the uphill part of the building to the top eave.
Both sides, top,
Sure, sure. No, I'm just conflaring. Okay. One of the concerns that I have for that area is that it's extremely wet. That whole area of Forest Gardens behind my building, I'm in the first building when you pull in, which is building number 4 now, since we just changed the names of it to the numbers. The backside is always wet. The side that, you know, even in the front, we have a small little retaining pond. I know on the Pine side across the street, they have a retaining pond. That is always wet. And my large concern is if you're going down, is if there's any water damage, any flood damage that comes from that, I have to now investigate, is that something that the HOA has to handle for additional flood insurance? That brings up our premiums, which brings up the cost of all, and that gets spread across not just people in the buildings of 5 and 6 that may have a basement, but it's going to impact people that are in buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4 as well. If that's something that we have to plan for. Agreed. I've owned there for over 5 years. It's always wet. Agreed. Okay.
Jack, we can't hear the responses on Zoom when people are doing that.
Sorry. So we have not had any water issues while we've been excavating through this pretty bad torrential winter and spring. The only time we had any water is when we had some snow and ice formed, and then I think we were all surprised that within a day or so that water dissipated. You know, so you've got, I don't know, 2 feet of crushed stone underneath the slab of the next foundation with a walkout. In this current foundation, you have 9 feet of fill.
Okay.
So I don't see, and there's
So, but
a
if you're,
drainage swale on the left-hand side of the current building, which has a catch basin to it, which then of course goes into the center circle, which is where that water flows.
also the catch
So
basin.
all of that water will drain into there. And the same thing for the next 2 buildings. So, I mean, the drainage is done, I mean, that was done by Horizons 25 years ago. And it's been in place for all that time, and there's never been a flood there.
Yes,
on
I
on
have
those
no, I have
lots.
no recollection of a flood, but at the same time, none of the existing buildings have that basement walkout concept.
That's
there.
true. Right.
So I don't know the full impact of that. And
Well, it certainly won't affect
not-
the
I'm
upper.
not saying I'm not saying you're the same builder, but as you know, the previous builder of those buildings didn't exactly, what's the nice word I'm going to use here? Do
Let's
a
just say
great
that I'm
job.
suffering from his
We suffered
lack of
too.
performance.
We just spent about $130,000 to replace the stairwells in both those buildings.
Oh, I know. I watched it. I talk to the MTR guys all the time. So
It's so,
yeah, so we're trying to do things a little bit differently. We've changed the angles on the stair towers. We've
Yep.
used AZAC material so it won't rot. We've used all pressure treated lumber underneath in the frame. The design personally is a disaster. The design is required because it's not a sprinkled stairwell
yes, that's
to
the open.
allow smoke to, evacuate the stairs. So you can safely, come out of that stairwell from your building if it's on fire. The problem is it lets every bit of rain and water and snow into those stair towers. So the fact that if they lasted 20 years, I think that's pretty good. It's just a bad design, and I would love to change that design. So in the current one, if I could, and I sprinkle it, I may put in a window, to be able to keep the elements out. Because I don't need to have those open areas for smoke evacuation because I have a sprinkled system. So
But by doing that, wouldn't that make those 2 buildings look different from the person standing in the middle of the circle?
the stair towers could look different if I have to stay exactly the same. I will, but it's, I guess I'm
Oh, I know,
saying that
but
it's a bad design.
I'm that
So,
beside, I'm looking for uniformity in the community of it itself. And one of the other items that one of my board members brought up was by putting those lofts at the top now, we don't know what the down, what is the impact down the road to replacing the roofs or any damages to the roofs, as our buildings that are existing that have been there for a while, we know we need to put new roofs on them probably in the next 5 years or so.
yeah, you
So-
got a 25-year roof on there.
Yeah.
And
So-
it's been about 20 plus years.
That's why I'm saying my
Right.
buildings that we're currently in, we're going to need new
Right.
roofs. But we don't know 20 years from now, or if there's going to be issues or problems with related to the snow, ice, wind, rain that those areas deal with, which as you see the siding come off all the time due to snow, ice, wind and rain.
Yeah, you won't see snow siding come off of my buildings. And these buildings are built to IBC building code with hurricane ties to keep the roofs from flying off. This will be a stick built as opposed to a truss built roof line. So it'll be
I'm not
every
sure.
bit to code. And
Can you explain what that is? Sorry, I don't know.
Oh,
Between
yeah,
stick built
so-
versus roof. I'm
so-
sorry.
the current building is built with trusses, so they're pre-manufactured roof structures.
Okay.
Right. This building will be built straight up with just on-site lumber from scratch because there's a vaulted ceiling, right? So you have less space. So when you use a truss, you end up having to fill in the attic. Right? They're thinner. They're certainly structurally designed to withstand all the loads required by the structural engineer, but they're pre-manufactured. In this case, we're not doing that because we need to use that volume for living space. So we plan to build that structure at a 2x12s, right? Which will be as strong or stronger than a truss design system. But in terms of roof cover, all you can get is 20 or 25-year roof shingles. So they do have to be replaced every 20 or 25 years. It's easy the first time because you can just roof over it.
Sure.
Not very hard, not very easy the next time, right? Because then you have to peel off the next 2 layers and then put a new layer on. So I don't think that adding, and I can have Stuart comment on this as well. I think adding living space under the roof line in that attic space affects the integrity of the roof in one bit.
Okay. And the last concern that we had was right now, since all the units and all in the 2 existing buildings and the new building that we're almost got it up and
Yep.
going. Since all the units are all the same size, everybody pays an equal share of their HOA, both to Forest Ridge as a total property, but also Forest Gardens. Now, when we get into this situation, if these are approved and there's going to be 8 units in one building, 8 units in another building that are larger, I don't know how I'm going to justify having them either paying the same cost, or do I have to put an additional cost on them because now they're using more space and more land and more consumption.
Well, I think when I read the declaration, right, the HOA specifies it by unit. So I don't think it specifies whether it's a 3-bedroom unit or an 8-bedroom unit. So I don't know that the HOA can charge more if it's a 4-bedroom unit than a 3-bedroom unit. And I don't believe there's any more cost to maintaining the exterior of that building with an extra bedroom or bathroom in it than without. So, but that, again, I don't control that. I mean,
I
I
know.
do have
But that's
48 of the
those are
72
the concerns.
quotes,
I'm
that-
just voicing the
association,
concerns
I
that I get,
understand. but I don't know how to, I don't know. I can't see the HOA fees or maintenance fees essentially. And
maintenance
I
fees,
don't
no,
see
whatever.
how this incurs additional maintenance because there's a bedroom in the basement.
Well, like I was alluding to, if there's that bedroom in the basement, if we have to deal with any flood dam or flood insurance, those are fees that go
I
up.
don't think
those
you
are-
get flood insurance, but I think your insurance would cover it and their insurance would cover it. I mean, each unit is insured by the owner and your general liability insurance insures the envelope,
Mhm.
not necessarily the flood damage that would happen in a lower unit if it
Well, that's what we need to
somehow got
investigate.
flooded.
That's why I need to investigate is how that
Yeah,
works.
that's just how liability insurance works. You're just insured for I'm going through this now with you and that's just, you're covered for the exterior and the open land.
Yep.
And the parking area and the gazebo, not the unit.
Mhm.
So,
but those are some concerns from the HOA and
Okay,
open up to any other.
thank you.
I'm so on the HOA board there. So the townhomes in Forest Woods are at the back of these two new buildings that for which you're requesting a variance. Sure, thank you.
Just want to make sure that
Understood. So for at least 4 of the units, 2 buildings in Forest Woods that are behind those, we don't see that their property values would be increased as it indicates in the variance. Their property values will actually decrease because you've got an increased level, what we're calling the 4th level in the plans, that's above them. And so you've got this additional level looking down on these Forest Woods townhomes. And so that's an impact to privacy and an obvious thing that people are going to see. But in addition, with this extra, the towers and the extra, build out of the roof, it's going to, impede the sunlight that comes through to those buildings, because that's west facing, right? From those townhomes, you're looking directly west, so that's the setting sun. So, sunlight, sunsets, all of those things are going to be impacted by the increased size of these new buildings. Yeah, I think that was our primary concern. The others have all been addressed here.
Okay, you do recognize that these buildings are no taller than buildings we put in if we didn't use the roof line.
Understood. The front of the buildings
So-
is no taller, but the back, if I'm
The
looking
back
at
is
these-
taller at the bottom. It's no taller at the top. It can't be, right? So if you measured from the road to the eave at 35 feet and you carried that through the back of the building, that isn't any taller than if we put units on the top floor or not.
I understand, but if you're thinking about a peak like that, the old style buildings would just have a peak. Now you're building out on one side because you got the towers. So light, rather than just shining, being able to get over just the peak and come down.
No,
got more of an
no, the perspective doesn't change like that. The building on the backside has the same roof line as the current buildings. It's going to appear bigger from the back because you see the walkout, but it's not actually bigger.
not what I see in the diagrams that were provided. So
Stuart, do you want to comment?
Yeah. There's the main bridge line that runs along the 2 football building. That bridge doesn't change whether was built over. So in terms of a sun shading diagram, we can demonstrate it, that there's these gable roofs are lower than the principal ridge. Principal ridge doesn't change. We'll be able to go on top. In terms of shading, there's no difference. Because the
yes, please. This is what I'm looking at. So the sun is behind here. I'm
correct. But this is a forced perspective standing at the ground level, very close to the building.
right.
So to your concern, I think what you'd have to see is the actual image from the neighboring buildings, which is much further away. Correct?
Not
This would be, you'd be standing in that stream at the base of the hill.
right. And the houses are right on the other side of the street.
Right. So by the time you actually come back, our perspective angle changes, such that ridge line, because that ridge doesn't change. That stays there regardless.
Right. But these are coming out, however far that distance is, that much closer. So rather than any light coming straight down this line, it's now being blocked by these 4 towers, right?
Yes, I see where you're coming from. I'd be happy we could do a shading analysis, and I guarantee you there'd be no change based on the neighboring properties. But we can demonstrate that.
I mean, the only change would be when the sun was perpendicular to the ground at the highest point. If something protruded from the back of the building, but that's not going to affect your building behind it. It's just going to affect the straight down shadow. So the roof lines don't change. Whether we use the space in the front of the back, the building is still the same building. There's nothing that changes from a shading perspective.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
So Robin Palfrey.
What's the distance between the Forest Woods and Forest Gardens, those two prospective new buildings going up to the 2 units? Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Should have a site plan
50
there.
yards. 50 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I,
60.
It's not that close.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm on it, but I can't read the numbers there, so.
I don't know that even that full site plan would have a perspective that would give you that. There's no scale on it.
These are the two stock.
Right, it's between
And
the stone wall, the stream, the back of their land and their duplex.
Stuart, I don't remember going back to my trigonometry days, how to calculate shadows off of buildings. You can do the calculation. And
We don't need to, because actually we build it in a three-dimensional computer model, and place it on the software sophisticated enough to do that. So we can predict the sun, that anytime.
But if Jack, if the premise that the building height doesn't change,
Right.
whether you consume more interior space or less, I don't know how the shadows would change.
Right.
And we're not changing the height of the building.
no, but for Robin's benefit, when he said the impact of less sunlight, I'd like, I mean, that's something that could be done. You can calculate that, the height of the building, the angle of the whatever. Well, again, trigonometry 60 years ago. I can't remember it.
Yeah. The building would be a little bit higher than the trees in that buffer zone, I think. Not much higher, but a little higher.
Bless you.
Anything else for context?
Stuart, you want to come?
I got it. So just for context, I'm talking with David, we looked at this a couple of different ways and how to potentially achieve this. And one of the options we looked at was actually adding the gable dormers to the street side, the front of the building. Now, if we actually did that, we didn't do that because we thought this was a more sympathetic approach by keeping the street side the same as all the other buildings. But if we added them to the street side, it is no longer required. It's only 4 stories at any given level. So, this we thought was a more sympathetic approach to keeping the street within the circle, looking identical. Arguably, as I said, we could add them on the front, not the back, which would take your shading question out of the way. The buildings would look different on the front. Because of this living. This would just go straight for land use permit. There would be no requirement of this board to even vote on it because it'd be within the
Wouldn't require a variance.
ordinance as written. So we thought this was the better approach. But obviously that's your decision to make.
While we're on this, Stuart, I have another question for you, and I was getting to this in a minute, but you brought it up, the bedroom location, okay? On the top floor units, the 5th floor, I'm gonna call it, all the way up, the bedrooms are all in the back, at the very back, in what I'm gonna call the 4 turrets, okay? And I do believe that there's quite a bit of difference from the ground, from here to that top corner there, not this 35 feet that we're measuring in the front. The sidewall going up that encompasses these bedrooms. But here's where I'm going with this. I'm going to it from the life safety. timing couldn't be worse. We just had a horrible fire on Main Street. Thankfully, our department did very well with that. We both just talked about that behind this building, the walkout basements with very little, no backyard because of the steep wall. In the case of an extreme fire, I am really more worried about getting the people that could, if it was at night, that was sleeping up in that back top story when you cannot get a vehicle around the building just because of the way it's situated. Not thinking of Bill Road. I think you may be better to rethink moving. I realize the aesthetics won't match the rest of the building. But from a life safety stand, my biggest opposition to this right now as a board member is the lack of access in case of fire to those bedrooms in the, I call it the 5th level of the building. Okay. And I was waiting to go through this to bring this point up, but Stuart brought it up, and I don't know what the answer is.
I think we've run this by Chief Beard, and he doesn't have any objection to this design. And there is, legal code access and egress for fire in the design. So, and there are many more sprinkle heads in this building than there are in the current building. So,
We're gonna increase the
So-
fire capacity.
so we have to sprinkle not only the open area, the living area, but we have to sprinkle the attic area above the living space, right? Because there still will be some attic area above the living space, and that also has to be sprinkled. So this goes to a full 13 system, including sprinkling the stair towers. So this is, in my estimation, the estimation of Ron Beard, your chief, and our fire safety consultant, a safer building than the last 4 buildings. But it's much more heavily fire protected.
That's because of the increased fire capacity.
Right, I think we don't have an exact count yet, but there are probably 30 to 50% more heads in this building than in the current building.
Gotta sprinkle 2 more full units. Well,
Correct, plus the stair towers, plus the walkways between the units on the deck areas as well. So this will be a wet building, and a very safe building from a fire perspective. And I don't know if Ron mentioned that to you or not, Carol. Yep. Okay.
we have any more public comments? Okay, go ahead.
I think this was on Zoom.
I do, thank you. I weren't sure that there was anybody else.
We got one here on the floor. We'll take that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. If you got one on the floor, go ahead. I'll wait till last.
Hi, my name is Keisha Chambers, and I'm the secretary of the Forest Gardens HOA Association. And so I have a question. What are the alternatives to adding a basement to the building? What are the alternatives if you don't do a basement level?
Not adding a basement and having to eat the additional cost, not providing the units that we're getting a demand for, which are larger units.
Okay, so you don't really have to add the basements?
Have to add them? No,
Okay,
no, I don't know any builder that has to add a room.
okay.
It's a desire, and it's a request from our customers.
Okay. Sorry, hold on a second here. And in terms of the parking, so as Greg, our president, has mentioned already, we're very concerned about the parking. So for example, the 2 buildings that we have there now, we barely have like the first building that you see when you drive in. There's probably only like maybe 5 or so parking spaces. And then the next building over, there are a few with just the 2 buildings there. And then you add, and the third building, anyway, once we get all 6 buildings there, we're still very concerned that there won't be enough parking spaces. What is your plan for the parking? And can you tell us how many spaces there will be altogether when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think we have 149 spaces,
149 parking
149
spaces?
per code. As
Okay.
Carol said earlier, we have enough spaces per the town ordinance based on the number of units, to be built around that circle. I mean, they may not be right in front of your building. You may have to walk 50 feet
Yeah,
to get from your parking spot to your car, but we're trying to make sure that we provide an easier access from the street to the units.
okay.
Would it be great to have elevators? Yeah, but they're impractical for the situation that we have, and they certainly wouldn't match the aesthetic.
So 149 parking spaces.
149.
Oh, 149. And
And
then,
then we've added space in front of the current building that we've just finished because we don't have that bump out. So if you looked at that, that's about 8 parking spaces wide. We don't have that on the plan,
okay.
but essentially you can park about 8 cars in front of that building.
Mhm.
So that would get us up to 157, which is more than what's required. And we would do the same thing for the next 3 buildings. We don't plan to build that bump out, so you would then have the ability to just walk on a sidewalk from building to building.
Okay. And do you have I know it's not on this plan, do you have a plan for like can we like see a plan for the parking so we can see like what it,
Well, I don't
looks
need
like
to
in the
add
big-
additional parking per code.
No, just so we can see like what it, give a visual of like.
Oh, is
what
there
it
a plan
kinda
for it?
what it looks like.
Yes, it should be in your packet and it's on the site plan.
Yeah.
I get it. I have a confidence. That's not true. 2005. Okay. Give me time to go.
Yeah, it'd be good to see what that,
Carol?
looks like, just to give us some
I believe
comfort.
this is the. We need a telescope to read it, but that's the plan.
Yes, is that original 2005 plan?
Oh, this thing, okay.
Mm.
One that's like.
Yep.
That's.
Yeah, I mean, the whole center section doesn't change. There's just, for the last many years, you've only used the parking spots in front of your first 2 buildings. Right? I mean,
because-
very rarely, other than the guy that's got a trailer parked there.
Yeah,
But no one really parks around the circle, but parking is intended to be on the inside of the circle and the outside of the circle. The street's wide enough. Right? So there is ample parking plus some
okay.
in there. It may, again, you may have to walk across the parking lot to get from your car to your unit, but
Right.
it is a parking lot
But according to whatever the plans are, there will be parking like in the middle. So you got, it's.
all the way
buildings
around.
are
Yeah,
going around.
pull-in spaces.
And in the middle as well. So,
Correct.
oh,
Yep.
okay, got it.
Yeah, and I mean, we could stripe it if you wanted us to, when we do the top coat paving at the end of the project.
That would be
If you
helpful.
wanted it,
Yes, we
you know,
definitely.
most people don't want all that, but I'm happy to
Yeah,
pay the extra money to stripe it so people know where to park.
yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would be.
Shopping plaza view, but.
Yeah, it kinda doesn't look great, but that's fine.
It would be.
Oh, yeah,
very
they won't
helpful,
park
yeah.
between the lines anyhow, but I'm happy to stripe your parking lot if that's helps you. Huh? Yeah, they're gonna put their name on it, this is David's spot. But yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, would I like to see more amenities, in the whole area? Sure, but there's just, there's no room for doing much.
And then, so, I mean, we had our meeting, of Forest Garden Board. I know that, the gentleman that was just up here has a concern for the, back. So Forest Gardens has a concern for the aesthetics as well. So if you do put the bedrooms on the front, then we, then we will be unhappy with that because it won't match the rest of the buildings, the aesthetics.
But it does match the rest. If you look at the rendering.
They're concerned.
Oh, if we move it to
Yes,
the
if
front,
we
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so
we-
then
we
we're,
would prefer to have it in the front because from a construction standpoint, it's a lot easier for me to put them in the front than it is in the back.
yeah,
But again, in deference to the HOA, we said we want the buildings to look as much as the other buildings, you know. And again, if it was up to me, I'd change the design somewhat radically because it's designed with 25-year-old technology. There's a better way to build a building today. And we're doing some of that with the way we're building our foundation today, using insulated forms. So you have a better insulated building. But it's an antique, you know, so we're building in 1990 or 1980 construction technology, trying to force that into 2024, 25. Yep.
Just looked at it for placement of building.
All my little dashed lines here.
You know, I'm thinking about parking, just let us speak to that.
And you notice if you look at the tongues on the first two buildings, that doesn't exist on the third building now. I know it shows it in this old drawing. But so there's additional parking spaces on each of these three buildings close to the building. Right? So, you know, that could either be designated as a drop-off spot if you didn't want people to park there. So if we're striping the lot, you know, you could call it a drop zone. It's up to you. You guys tell me what you want to write there. We'll write it. But, you know, we did the curbing so that it was easy to actually get ski equipment, right, from your car up on the curb. Instead of doing a vertical curb, we did a slope curb. So I'm trying to make it easier. And we did a ramp so you don't have to walk upstairs with bags, so you can pull, you know, your bag up a ramp as opposed to steps.
I don't think I'm clear on you said the third building won't have the parking. Yeah, I don't think I'm clear.
This little tongue that sticks out, that's white here.
Oh,
So you gain additional parking, but.
because there's, for this building here, there's not one, but this building, I don't know.
Another product with designated spaces.
Oh, I
It's
see.
gonna be huge additional parking.
Oh, I see.
And again, like I said, if you wanted that to not be parking and call it a loading zone, so whoever comes and always has a space to drop off their luggage, you know, so be it. Put up a sign and we'll stripe it as no parking drop off zone. That's totally up to your. I'm happy to work with you on that.
Thank you.
And again, I think you only have parking issues, you know, 2 weeks a month, 2 weeks a year, Christmas, and
Very, very busy.
I've never seen that lot full. I
Summertime,
mean, maybe right in the center, but
very busy.
Yeah.
Especially with 5, 6 buildings.
okay.
Very visible. I know summertime we had issues with parking as your crews had a lot of equipment.
Well,
Spread.
yeah, if I'm taking up 80% of your
Yeah.
parking, yeah, sure, right. I'm hoping to get out of there so I don't take up your space, right?
Okay, do we have questions from the people on Zoom? Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Miles. So I have a concern here. I've been in the planning board office several times. The current Forest Ridge development up there is in non-compliance with respect to a condition that was approved as a condition of approval on the upper units, which was that they had to develop and construct a new recycling waste area. That hasn't been done. So this current application truly is, you know, the subdivision up there, that portion of it is in non-compliance. I think Carol knows what I'm talking about. And all it would require, David, I think, is for someone to build a recycling and waste drop-off station. That was part of an original condition. Carol has all the information on it. I'm sure she can give it to you. That was one of my concerns. And the other concern is that, and looking at will the whole building be sprinkled? Every bedroom, is it 100% sprinkled?
It'll be sprinkled based on the requirements of the IBC and the fire code,
Yeah, so it'll meet NFPA conditions?
of course,
Okay,
just like the current building.
all right. I guess one of the other things that I'm concerned about is that the requirement for hardship is pretty hard to meet. From what in order for granting a variance. I haven't heard anything here tonight that shows me that anything other than it is financial, or as David said, he's doing it to because his people that are buying things want bigger units. Financial is no reason to grant a hardship. And in order to grant a variance, you need a hardship. There is only one other that I'm aware of building in town that has ever done this. And there was not, I believe in that instance, there was not any units put on the lower portion of it. It was strictly for mechanicals and stuff like that. Because they had to excavate it, they used it for mechanicals. So none of the lower part of the building was used for occupancy. I do have the same concerns as Miles about safety, getting somebody out of that top unit, even with sprinkling. I don't know what, I mean, it takes more time for firemen to get there. It also takes more time for paramedics to get there. So, I mean, there is that lead and lag time. I've been on the zoning board before, and I gotta tell you that some of the reasons why the town doesn't allow any buildings above the 4-story mark. I think the applicant knew about the soil conditions that were there. I know it's an additional cost to do that so that you can build that building instead of a slabs. So you actually do have the 5 stories. It would be a slab on grade, which is what the other ones currently are, if I'm not mistaken. There's engineering geotechnical materials today that allow you to do that without having to dig down that far.
No, there are. You have to go to virgin soil.
Well,
That's a requirement by a soil engineer.
well, you can do thickened concrete slabs. I'm sorry about the noise from back of me. Hang on. I don't think you want to hear that. It was a loud boat going by. Anyway, like I said, financial is not a reason for a hardship. And we've had other applications in town that brought that to light, and the town said no, that wasn't the requirement. I realize you're trying to recoup your cost in order to build this building, because you have to do all that excavation, David, but I'm not sure that it meets the requirement of a hardship.
Well, didn't Riverwalk get a similar variance?
Riverwalk?
They did
No.
get variance, but they did, I think Paul was talking about Riverwalk. And they were allowed to add additional units to the basement. Walkout.
I'm sorry, Carol, can you go to a microphone? I can't hear you.
Okay, Riverwalk, it wasn't a variance. They essentially got the planning board because it was to give them the equivalent of a variance, and they did allow additional units in the basement. So that was, and part of his problem was that he had to excavate contaminated soils, and in order to hit the virgin ground, he had to construct a basement. And so for part, I can't remember if it was, he had to do this twice. One was for the in-seasons, And I'm not
Correct.
sure I'm remembering the in seasons versus the Riverwalk.
It was the
Um,
in-season.
But one of them, he was allowed to put additional units or living space in the basement because he had so much of it. If you remember, he came and
I
he
do remember.
asked to put the mechanicals there, but then because there was so much space there, he asked to put some additional units in there and the planning board allowed it. So
They were, but the majority of that space down below, I believe you'll find was mechanicals and a laundry room. There was, if there was units, it was,
Several.
I don't know how many there were, but there weren't many. But like I said, financial is not a reason to grant a variance. And that's all I've heard tonight. Now, if you got some other reason other than financial, that it meets, then I think that you probably have something, but financial is just not a reason to grant, just because your people want it or you need it to recoup the cost of it because it's an additional cost. I would think that if you look in the zoning board of adjustment rules and look at the state RSAs pertaining to hardships, I think you'll see that, it really needs to be something more than just a financial hardship. Sorry about these boats. I'm done.
Matt, good.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah, this is Kevin Barry. I'm on the Pines HOA board. Our original issues around this was the height, which seems to fall in line from what I'm hearing this evening. I kind of, what Miles and Paul had talked about in terms of the equipment going to the back of the buildings, I had brought up as an issue as well. I think I wanted to revisit a little bit, and it was kind of hard to hear at the beginning, the contaminated soil issue. Was that primarily from equipment, or what actually caused the contaminated soil?
The previous owner of this land buried everything under the sun in that soil during some previous excavation work. We found all manner of unsuitable things in there. Organic matter, metals, woods, cement. It was a dump site. And for some reason, he was allowed to dump that and anything else he felt comfortable dumping and burying in there for 2 decades.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that we kind of talk about financial, but that obviously, David, that's something that wasn't even brought to your attention or you were made aware of. That's
Absolutely. I mean, no one expected that.
yeah.
During foreclosure, during due diligence, no one expected to dig a 9-foot deep hole to get to virgin soil.
Right.
No one expected to have to put up, a 12-foot concrete wall because of the depth of the foundation to get to virgin soil. No one expected that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Engineers, soil scientists, nobody. And we now expect that the next 2 sites will be even worse based on anecdotal information about what people are telling us was buried back there over the last 2 decades.
Okay. And Dave, this might be a little bit off center here for the topic, but behind the pines, I know there's a no trespassing, but I know that there's materials up there. Is that the same issue, or is that not related at all? Or
I mean, I don't know where the previous owner buried the bones.
okay.
I know there's stuff back there that's been a bone of contention from the owners and, their partners. And, yeah, there are a lot of things that were hidden back there that no one inspected or wanted to inspect or wanted to know about. But I think that's a different issue and a different piece of land and a different ownership group.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that's a
I'm-
mess.
Yeah, I know it's a mess, and I'm just bringing it up for the meeting minutes. Just so, maybe that can be addressed as a follow-up item, but from what I've heard, you know, and Paul brought up a good point, I mean, but our concern was really just the height and the aesthetics of Forest Ridge and you know, what it's gonna look like in terms of our individuals and where they live at the Pine. So I appreciate all the feedback that you've provided this evening on that. I don't have any other comments and again, appreciate the feedback, David, on explaining the whole look and feel of the proposed development for building 5 and 6.
Thank you.
Hey, Miles? Yeah, one of the things I like to compare to, you know, and as far as comparison for the board is that there are a lot of sites, either at South Peak or other places where, for example, if they want a full basement, they have to blast a bunch of ledge. You can see that going on over at South Peak. Those people pick up the cost and they blast for that. If you look down along the river, there's people that they have really wet basements and there's just a ton of dewatering that has to go into it. I mean, if you had clay underneath your basement or, you know, where you were excavating for your foundation, you would have to take that out and put materials back in. I think this is just another one of those issues where it's, and I realize it's a cost to the developer or to the person who's doing it. But it really, you know, to bring it to the level of rising in order to grant a variance is I just wanted to give you those comparisons so that you would have something to think about.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. David, correct me.
I can't hear him.
Sorry.
Yes, just wanted to clarify a couple of points, and David can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so we're talking about the creation of 5 living levels. That's what the variance requirement comes into play, because the town permits 4 living levels. It's the 5th level stacked vertically in any given cut that requires the variance. So take the top floor out for a minute, can add the basement, that's permissible. That's the ordinance permits that, absolutely. We can add the 4th story on the front of the building, that's permissible, because at any given vertical cut, there would only be 4 stories at any given point. So whether you consider this a hardship, and that's for the board to decide, but as David said, in deference to trying to keep the front of the buildings aesthetically the same, the option in front of you is to create the 5 stories on the back of the building. So the same square footage can be achieved by putting the 4th story up on the front and the 4th story down on the back side. You get exactly the same square footage. The building height doesn't change. There's no variance requirement at that point in time. I said, so whether you consider it a hardship or not, trying to tie the front aesthetics in with the other buildings was part of the approach. So just wanted to kind of clarify, because there seemed to be some discussion on the basement specifically, but let's say the board denies the variance application, the basement can go in anyway, because there's nothing in the ordinance that precludes that. The 4th story can go on the front because there's nothing in the ordinance that precludes that. I said the rationale behind putting on the back was to try and keep it consistent from the front. That's what kicks in the 5 stories at any given level, which is where the variance is required.
Question.
Go ahead. I have a question right now, back to Stuart.
Yeah.
Yes, but if you move the bedrooms to the 4th story on the front, put up some dormers or something to let them light into.
Absolutely. So aesthetically, the buildings would be different on the front.
I realize that.
So what we're trying to do is keep the buildings consistent from the street side by adding it on the back.
When you add the dormer, this is a question, when you add the dormer on the front side, the height. Now, what about the height measurement to the primary E?
It's a
The
dormer.
dormer is not a primary
Dormer is
E.
not considered part of the ordinance.
So it would have to be just a dormer, not a cut up away.
Correct. As long as it doesn't exceed the primary eve or the ridge, which it wouldn't, it doesn't, the height ordinance isn't in play.
Sounds like you've got a mousetrap.
And I think it's, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because I think there's opposing perspectives from both ways.
But you can't have more than 4 floors of living space above or below ground. So it goes, the ordinance does say 4 stories above or below.
Above ground. And in any given
It
vertical.
says above and below.
But Paul, there's an extra piece of wording in there that says that any given vertical plane. So
That's,
you,
that's for the eve, but I mean, if you
No.
take a look at Article 6, Section B, Section B, 7, Roman numeral 2, it says there shall be no more than 4 floors used as living space above or below ground level as measured to any vertical plane, right?
so, so you
it's
could
still talking
conceive
about the 4 stories, I mean, 4 levels of living space, that's it.
but so,
It's not talking about floors, it's talking about living space.
right, stacked vertically. I mean, you can conceivably have a 50-story building. If it followed the hillside, at any given point, it might only be 2 stories at any given time.
Well, I guess, Stuart, that would depend on what you call the front and what you call the back. Because that was the issue.
Yeah.
That was the issue that the planning board had with the ones out by the town hall there. Because the road going back to South Peak was lower. And at one time they wanted to call that the front, and they ended up not being able to call that the front. So, look, I think.
We call the front
the front. Right, I think sprinkling this whole building makes it a lot more comfortable to being able to do what you kind of want to do. But I think you need, the 2 things I still have an issue with is, one, that the non-compliance issue with respect to how the solid waste is handled. And the second one is, I think you need to find a different way to say what the hardship is. Because just saying it's financial, to me, after sitting on the ZBA for a lot of years, it doesn't meet the requirements of a hardship. So maybe you could say, because of contaminated soil, which is the way that we went through the other one, that might possibly make it work when you're looking through your conditions of approval. All your different items you have to go through for granting a variance. Maybe you could say it's because you have to remove the contaminated soil. That would be a better way to do it. But I think you're setting precedents here you got to be careful of as well. So that's, I mean, I think the idea of sprinkling those buildings is great, especially in light of what happened in Lincoln with that, with that apartment building. I think that's awesome. But I think you need to find a different way of granting a variance other than financial hardship. And I really would like to see that's the waste disposal put in during this time.
The gentleman, yes.
Okay, we have a gentleman in the back waiting to speak.
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead. You have to get it down and record.
Name, serial number. Ken Gritson, or Twin Terrace, is that what you're? Forest Gardens. Ken Gritson, I did sign it. I have a question, with the basement, will that be the full footprint of the building? No, it's only in the back. Right. That's why the front, with the dormers in the front, would only be 4 levels. There's no basement.
That's why. With any given vertical cut, it'd be no more than 4 stories.
Which, as a resident, that would be directly looking out at these 2 last buildings and seeing that they're gonna have a totally different front from the others.
Not totally different. They'd have a dormer.
Except dormers would be the only difference, really.
Right.
And,
Or
well,
dormers. That's. No variance required to do that.
But there's no.
no. I would be all for a very similar facade in the front for as many buildings as possible.
I think you have a question here.
Yeah. In the beginning of the meeting, you were stating the hardship, and I would just like you to repeat that for me about what you found and how much more it's gonna cost you now, if you were gonna fill it, as opposed to the walkout basement.
Okay,
I
so
think that's your hardship here. I think we talk about it again. Maybe everybody can be a little clearer.
So we found all manner of unsuitable material. We found metal, we found construction equipment, we found excavation equipment, we found concrete, we found trees, things that just should never have been allowed to have been buried on a building site. And so we ended up having to excavate about 1,600 cubic yards of material to get down to where our soils engineer said, okay, you've got down to a base that you can build on. Well, then you put your foundation in, but now you've got to fill that back up. So not only did I have to dig it out, I had to truck it off site. Now I have to truck back in an equal amount of suitable soils. And most of it is certain size stone, which is a lot more expensive than putting dirt in, right? Because you have to have a certain level of compaction to be able to put your foundation on top of. So that was another, series of issues to deal with to be able to get that amount of material on site to be able to properly compact it to fill in that giant hole. We expect in the next two sites to have even more unsuitable materials. We've been told that broken foundations from forest woods were buried there, oil tanks are buried there, so we have no idea what we're going to uncover. Right now, they're full of dirt that was left when the previous owners passed away or moved on and lost the property to foreclosure. I have no idea what's under there. I don't even know what's in those piles of dirt. All I know is we've done some core samples, and the dirt that's sitting on top of the sites is unsuitable to use as building materials. So now I have to truck off all of that material, then dig a hole, then bring in another, 2,000 cubic yards of material if I don't do a basement. So
So that you can get it.
tremendous. Not only engineering it, but now we're having to re-engineer and relay out the infrastructure that they did incorrectly. So yeah, I mean, is Paul right? Is a significant part of this, a financial impact? Tremendously. I mean, this building is, just tremendously over budget, and it hasn't even gotten a final foundation in it. So engineering costs, now we're having to do the infrastructure differently because somehow they put infrastructure in, which nobody in their right mind would have approved, but someone had to approve it. And at the time, the only approval agency for buildings of that size was the town of Lincoln. So the electrical, sewer, and water was put in and approved by the town, and it's in the wrong place, and it's not even put in properly. So I have to tear all that out and rebuild all of that with the co-op.
Hey, David, could I ask you a question?
Wait a minute, Paul, wait a minute, Paul, wait a minute.
1 second, would you? Let us just finish up here.
I'm next.
Okay, so, when Dennis Ducharme did the project, his removal costs were in excess of $1 million. I can't remember if it was something. Thanks. And that the planning board considered to be basically a hardship, and even though they're in a different context, in the planning board context with more discretion, to basically forgive things. But David has already spent $300,000. So even if, assuming that the next two holes are
Can't hear you, Carol.
next, can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right, assuming that he's gonna spend at least the same amount of money, $300,000 for the next two homes, that's $900,000 just for the 3 homes. It doesn't include, the cost of the additional basement or anything else. So it is on a par, in my opinion, with what Dennis Ducharme had to deal with over at Riverwood, which was the contamination from the mill. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. It's not talking about just a slightly more expensive or, the desires of his client, sure, clients might want more, but the reality is that we get more grief from townspeople about Forest Bridge than just about anything else. And this is, David is trying to take this opportunity to clean up and finish the disaster that was up there. So I'm just saying, from a town's perspective, from a broader perspective, I personally think that we should support.
From the homeowner's perspective that are here, you live it every day. You see what's going on. Kevin, you're on Zoom there. From your perspective, listening to Mr. Yeager tonight, answering, I think, the questions and a willingness to work with you. Have you changed your opinion or your mind on, you're working or going forward with the plan as presented? Kevin, that was directed to you.
Well, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, again, our owner's concerns were around height, the aesthetics, the look and feel. It sounds like overall that concern has been, for the most part, mitigated in the past hour and a half. So, we all want to work together as a town, and there's an investment that's being made here. And, that's why I brought up the soil issue, because it wasn't a known cost up front. So, I think that has to be factored in one way or the other. I know that there's ways to look at this, but it is a financial impact, and we're all trying to do the same thing in the town, which is to create a good community. And we had concern about the height. Sounds like it's not going to be the concern that we had a week or two ago. So it's more of a positive impact now from my perspective than it was 90 minutes ago.
Thank you. Greg?
So I think my biggest concern is the potential for water. That is really my biggest concern. So I don't know if there's any other additional planning that can be done to make sure that there is no potential for like that water flooding issue. If I don't know if there's extra channels or whatever water mitigation you can put in place that's like over and beyond just the base level. Does that make sense? That'd be like my biggest concern.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, my concerns still are the same. From everything I see, that is a bulkier building. The roof is bulkier than it would be with just a simple peak. And I don't understand how that cannot impact the light comes down behind it. So my perspective on that has not changed as a result of this meeting. And in addition, with the extra layer of windows on that, what we're calling the fourth level in the plans, there's no doubt in my mind those are above all the trees and the bush in the middle. So those are definitely looking down on those buildings in Forest Woods, and there's a loss of privacy there. So the fact, yes, I understand maybe but for the buildings that are behind these new ones, as a result, fourth level. with the that extra level at the back of those buildings. Just my perspective.
Do you have anything?
The last thing I just wanted to add, as it relates to all the digging and the cost, so I'm not sure, I'm not 100% convinced that the digging for buildings 5 and 6 will result in the same or additional costs. What I'm wondering is if like, how would you know there's going to be, I mean, I know you're thinking there might be additional costs, but until you actually dig to see, because right now, so you have some additional costs, but have you done any digging near 5 and 6 to even know for sure that there's additional rubbish or what have you? So I just, I'm
I can
not,
tell you that the manager of Forest Ridge, Dave Larson,
yeah,
has come over and told us several times that he knows that there are broken foundations and old equipment that have been buried there. And Dave's been the manager of that facility for as long as I've been in town, which is 17 years. So can I x-ray it and see what's in there? No. I don't have superpowers, but I can tell you that from a lot of anecdotal discussions for people that have been on site for a long time, those sites have more unsuitable materials than the one we just excavated.
Mhm.
And we're expecting the worst. Will we be pleasantly surprised if there's less? Sure, but I doubt it.
Mhm.
Based on what Dave and others have told us they've witnessed the previous owners burying back there.
And if I may continue, I think it is a hardship because you're doing the right thing. I mean, you could just bury it and leave it, but we know, what happens over years. The soil gets contaminated. Kids are playing out there in grass that's sucking up oil. Metal deteriorates and acids and things get into the soil, and it's just not good. I think that the town itself has run into some issues with contamination down at the Riverfront Park there. I mean, to the tune of $1 million more. So by alleviating it, digging it up, I think you're doing the right thing. And I think personally it is a hardship. Others in the room may disagree or on Zoom may disagree, but that's their opinion and I'm sticking to mine. I was the president of the Homeowners Association in Forest Ridge many years ago when we didn't have any of these problems. We had 98 units and that was the end of it. It was simple. It was very simple. But it's a wonderful community and, we want to keep it that way. And certainly, as Robin has said, I mean, all of us want to protect the value that we put into our home. We don't want to lose value. And I think the town overall, from what I'm seeing, if you look at the prices, things aren't going down. They're going substantially up. In fact, I think is there a home for sale on Twin Tip now, Greg?
On Twin Tip?
Yeah.
Well, it's the ones that for sale are the ones that.
All the new units.
Currently in the
An
building.
older one, something already existing, no?
I think there's one that might have went pending recently.
Okay.
Because I know it was above 500. The last one that sold was above 500.
Yeah.
I can't specify exactly which one it was.
But that's my spiel. And, I think that, by digging up and doing the right thing, we're getting rid of contamination that's going to cause future generations problems.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, before we close the public side of the comment, I just had one question. I just want to see if we can't get an answer on. Paul had mentioned that there was a second recycling facility that was supposed to be put up on site there. Harold, you know anything about this? An auxiliary recycling center?
I've never heard of that, and I've been involved in this project for a decade. Certainly not at Forest Gardens.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that material recently. I do know that there were some requirements associated with recycling and as new pods were created, they were supposed to be some associated transfer thing. I don't remember the details of it. And I think Paul was involved in, I don't know if it's a lawsuit or written lawsuit or something, because they located the transfer station right near Paul's house and the house of his mother. And I have a vague memory of
Miles, if I could comment, not considering you asked about that. I take great exception to what Carol said. I have brought the documentation down there twice to town hall, twice, and shown it, and the documentation clearly shows that it is a condition of approval.
Approval for what?
When Ryan was there, I brought it to him, he brought forward. I'm sure maybe David doesn't know about it because he's new to the situation.
But
So-
what, Paul, what is it? You're saying it's a requirement of approval, but approval of what?
It
mean,
was a requirement of
Forest
the.
Gardens, the
It was-
Forest Gardens property has had an approval for 20 years.
There you
And
go,
this is an ongoing
Right.
development.
right.
I don't know that there's anything in the declaration during our due diligence that told us that if you finish the 72 units at Forest Gardens, you have to put in some kind of trench system.
David, if you want, I will give you the same information I gave Carol. It was a condition of approval that after a certain date, everything from that date on had to go into a newly designed solid waste and recycling area. And it goes back probably, oh man, I don't want to say how many years. I'm in Georgia right now. I apologize if I was at home. I could have pulled the paperwork right out. And I have given it to the town twice. And I also don't want you people in there, including ZBA, Jack, who always has to have something to say, that think that.
I'm following
I
your
don't-
lead,
I don't-
Paul. Wait a minute.
Yeah, Jack, that's okay. Give me my minute. This is supposed to be public input, Jack. You can have yours later. I don't want you to think that I'm against any of this. What I'm trying to, all I'm trying to say was the solid waste disposal should be handled. And I think you can get what you want by going with disposal of contaminated soil rather than it's going to cost me too much. That I think should be the reason for your variance. I haven't,
I think it states it in my application, unsuitable soils.
right. I mean, I think, right. Well, but it says, if you look at it in there,
So,
David, there's a lot
That's
of
what it
references.
is.
Right, but there's a lot of references to financial hardship, and I think you should just remove those.
I don't think anything in my application says financial hardship.
Well,
I hear what everybody's
anyway,
saying here. I think we all do. I'd just like to get back to, so we can move the application along. Is there something that needs to be addressed about this secondary recycling?
I think you can make it a condition of approval, Miles.
This
You
is
can
the
make it a
last
condition
two,
of approval.
this is the last two buildings that will be developed in this thing. And there is some requirement that was agreed upon, even maybe by a previous developer, I'm sorry. But if it is your responsibility, if we could just get these little things taken care of, and I don't know what you need, you've got a nice facility down.
I don't know, Miles, I just went through a lawsuit with the Forest Ridge Homeowners Association, settled my part of it. And agreed to pave the road from White Oak Lane down to the end of the Pines. Nowhere in any of our discussions of a multi-year lawsuit has this ever been brought up. Nowhere. And I can tell you that if the Forest Ridge Property Owners Association had a requirement that we build one building that required a recycling or trash center, they would have said something. They would have requested it in one of these lawsuits. Never has anything come up. Kevin, you've been involved in this thing as long as I have. I don't know that that's ever been mentioned. And it's certainly not an approval for Forest Gardens. It may be for the rest of the 200 units that are in the 800 acres behind the
No.
clubhouse.
I'll give
but
you the.
it's
I'll
not a
give you the
requirement of
information.
Forest Gardens.
I'll give you the information. Who do I give it to? I went to David, who do you want me to give the
Send
information?
it to the ZBA. Send it to all the board members of the ZBA.
I gave it to the town planning office twice. So who do I give it to? Does anyone,
All the members of the ZBA.
do you want a copy of it, David, so you can see it too?
Sure, yes.
Okay, I'd be more than happy to provide it, but I would like it to be if you give this approval, could you condition it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Time to close to public comment, and then I would like to make a motion regarding the dumpster.
I
make
have a
to close.
motion on the floor to close the public comment.
Second emotion.
I have a second. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your comment.
My comment would be, Carol, you seem to be aware of some type of document.
Yes, I am. Can't hear Carol.
Can we get a copy
So-
of that?
It has nothing to do with the ZBA. That.
Exactly.
That is a town condition.
yeah.
That needs to be followed up on. It has nothing to do.
It's a
who do we
planning
take it
board
to?
requirement.
I don't think it has anything to do with ZBA. I think it's a town enforcement issue that needs to be looked at. And I would make the recommendation that it be looked at. Please.
Absolutely.
Is that a motion?
I guess so.
He makes a motion.
Just investigate and
Investigate.
enforce if it
And
seems to be
who would be investigated?
not
Can you
ZBA.
provide a copy of that to the board? Let's get a copy to the.
Whatever procedure that needs to be done to enforce something.
Absolutely.
Okay. But and it is, and that does not have anything to do with this
Right.
pending application right now, but I just thought I would ask the question, and obviously
No,
there's
it-
enough spirited
Absolutely should be
conversation to
enforced by
require
the
an
state.
answer.
That's a town has.
So, that being said, can we move to the application process? Okay, I might need some help with this on these questions, because I'm not the greatest. The first, the facts in supporting the variance, granting the variance would or would not, in this case, would not be contrary to the public interest because the finished building will meet all town height requirements while providing additional living space with only interior modification.
So we're polling. And
Carol?
I agree with that statement.
Okay, so those, we're gonna pull the board, those in favor signify by that this would not be contrary to the public interest. I hear you. I agree. Number two. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed because the building height will remain compliant with town height ordinance.
I agree with that statement.
I agree also. Number three, granting the variance would do substantial justice because new owners would have more living and storage space, which is limited with existing older design. It would increase value of upper and lower units, help offset costs of additions.
You make a motion that strikes everything there, possible.
I would second that motion in order to stay away from the financial. Yeah.
Mitigation of,
Contaminated
Soil.
soil.
I would make a motion to change that wording and I would vote that I agreed.
Agree.
I agree with the new wording also to remove any financial implication. Number 4, the variant, if the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. True. This would help increase all property values in Forest Ridge and Lincoln. I agree with that.
I agree.
All 4
Yep.
agree. And number 5, unnecessary hardship. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because the increased, again, we're gonna have to reword this. The increased cost of removal due to contaminated soil and material.
I think it's okay as written.
Is increased.
Oh,
You want me?
on.
Yeah.
I think that's what you do, it's just put, you move the last word in the first sentence from contaminated,
Suitable.
contaminated material. I think that would work. And as been shown by other developments in town, we have allowed that. So in this condition, I would agree with that number of thoughts.
I agree.
We all agree on.
It's gonna say the increased work of excavation due to dumping due to the contaminated materials would be offset to some degree. Previous owners did great disservice to their properties by dumping unsuitable materials on site instead of removing them as properly required. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. The finished buildings will meet all height requirements. And something. Oh, Lupo ordinance. While helping increase living space and offsetting the burden of I think that's fine. Miles,
I'm sorry.
part 2. Page 3.
And. Okay, the additional value created by adding. 1, this additional attic loft space plus being able to use the basement living area would offset the additional cost of having to create unwanted basement. So. Variance would create 5 floors of living space instead of the maximum number of no more than 4. Use of living space above or below ground level is measured through any vertical plane of the building set forth on land use planning ordinance, paragraph 5, height requirements, paragraph 2.
Did you do 2 proposed as a reasonable one because?
Maybe I'm missing a page here.
Yeah.
Page
Oh,
3.
I know what I did. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We'll forgive it.
Number 2, the proposed use is a reasonable one because the finished buildings will meet all height requirements ordinance, our Lincoln ordinance, while helping to increase living space and offsetting the burden of excavating and removing unnecessary, or we put contaminated.
Contaminated soil.
Contaminated soil. Okay, Carol, now do we read through these? Oh, on number two, yeah, on number two, the finished build.
Five.
Oh, it's all on the five. On the five together?
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, first time in the seat. I know. Always looks easy when you're on the outside. Okay, then we'll poll the board on granting the variance in relation to the 5 questions that we have answered here tonight. John? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
read Carol.
A motion that we all hold, we agree to unanimously on the polling. And I make a motion to approve the variance without condition.
I'd like to amend that to have the developer look at the issue that Mr. Bowden has raised in regards to the transfer station or an area for recycling. I think it's like the old one down front there with a gate, just take a look at it and see if it applies to you. And if it does, if it doesn't, it's out the window.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they made junior HOA maybe on it for that. Right.
Right.
We already decided that the town was gonna look into who's responsible. I don't think you should put it on him.
All right,
I don't think.
Yeah.
right. Let's put it on Stewart then.
I think,
Stewart said.
I think that we already decided
Taking out
that
the
the
garbage.
town was gonna look into.
I mean, I'll get the materials out and I'll send it to everybody. I do know that Paul sent it to me. I remember thinking that we should have dealt with it, or the planning board should have addressed it when they approved the Pines. And that is the last, development that was approved up there was the Pines. So, and they did not address it at the time, and I think I had just started. I was 2013 or 14. And I know that they did not address it then.
So we have a conditional motion on the floor. Jack?
I'll withdraw that then. Let Carol just, yeah, I'll withdraw the amendment.
What you could do is put in your minutes that you recommend that the planning office and the board of selectmen look into that.
That should already be in the minutes because I made a motion to do it and it was approved.
Right.
As a group, I would vote to direct us to do that.
Oh, I think we took care of it.
So it's in the minutes that.
Okay, that will approve the variance tonight and that the town will look into the potential agreement of a secondary recycling center with Mr. Yeager. All right, David. Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen, please.
Thank you all for coming too,
Thank you, yes.
your input.
Yeah, I did.
It's a long way from where the one is, all the way up. Motion to
I'll
adjourn.
second the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 8:55.